So when it comes to leading dive watches under $2,500, two that come to mind quickly are the Longine HydroConquest and the Oris Aquis. But the challenge with these watches, as well as anything, when you're trying to compare two watches is which one is better? Which one should you go for? So what I wanted to do in this video is look at comparing these watches on 9 different points of criteria, going through these different categories and trying to come up with an objective winner at the end. Not gonna be easy, but we're gonna try. So before we jump into this video, if you want more things HydroConquest and Aquis, we have 2 definitive guide articles looking at the history of these models, looking at some different models within the collection, also some different key highlights that you should be aware of when looking to buy one of these. We of course are going to go through a lot of the details here today, but that's going to take a different angle, looking at the breadth of the collection in a little bit more detail and understanding the backstory a bit more than what we're going to cover here. In this video, what we're going to try to prioritize mostly is looking at comparing these two watches on some of the traits that people look for when trying to buy the watch. Not going to be as much about a review, because we do have long in-depth reviews on both of these watches on the channel. I can link to those also in the description down below. But these 9 categories that we're going to be looking at include wearability, optionality, bracelet, bezel, case and dial finishing, water resistance, movement, heritage, and price. Each one of those categories is going to have a point associated with it. So if you win one of those categories, you get a point. If they tie, they both get a point. Before we do begin here, I do want to talk just a little bit about each one of these watches. And moving in ascending price order, we'll first discuss the Longine HydroConquest. That starts out with an automatic version around $1,300 when you're looking at that aluminum insert bezel option. Now, despite the decades-old heritage of the Conquest name for Longine, the HydroConquest was debuted in 2007 and borrows much of the standard Conquest dial design, but houses it within a diving specific case format, complete with a rotating bezel, serving as the modern entry diving point for the brand. In order to make this more of a direct comparison though, I did want to concentrate mostly on the ceramic bezel automatic variants, as those will be around $1,700 and it'll be a better comparison to the Oris. Now jumping up slightly in price, we have the Oris Aquis, a diving specific yet refined design that has been a bestseller for the brand since it was released in 2011. Despite its decidedly contemporary design and at times polarizing integrated bracelet, the Aquis has survived the vintage craze of the last 10 or so years, relying on a passionate enthusiast community that has spawned countless variations over the years and more recent introduction of the in-house powered Aquis Caliber 400 models. But in this video, we're going to focus mostly on the Sellita powered variants that are going to have that price range starting around $2,000. And now that we have our idea of our opponents, let's dig into the comparison, starting with optionality. Now, when I'm looking at optionality, what I'm thinking of is more of just what does the collection have to offer from different dial variations and options as a collector. Now, I think both of these models are going to do that quite well. You look at the HydroConquest, you have a wide just array of different sizes and dial colors to choose from, but if I had to pick one and give a slight edge to it, I'd probably go with the Aquis. Number one, it's going to have over 50 variations if you span across all the different sizes, but also the other reason why I think it should get the edge here is just because when they do offer optionality, they have the ability to also stick with some of their designs. You look at the Oris Aquis Cherry, the New York Harbor that just came out, the Upcycle. There's nothing really that can compete directly and has this staying power that I think the Aquis is able to demonstrate with some of these models compared to the HydroConquest that really is about just not really maybe overstepping in any direction, but just getting the job done. And it does do that well, but when you're talking about optionality, you maybe want to go a little bit further than that. So for the first point, I'm going to give it to the Oris Aquis. So now looking at wearability, and I think you have to chalk this one up as a tie just because there are so many different variants and case sizes to choose from on both fronts. You have 4 sizes on the Aquis side and on the Longine side if you're factoring in just the automatic versions. I will say that the Aquis is going to wear smaller than the proposed case size, so just always keep that in mind with the curvature of the lugs and also factoring in the integrated bracelet. I would say that it's going to always wear maybe a millimeter smaller than what the proposed case is going to potentially let on. The opposite will be true with Longine, as I would say probably 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter larger because the lugs are going to be longer and you're dealing with the protruding case elements that is going to be that crown, which is certainly oversized, and also the crown guards to accompany it. They're going to be much larger than that of the Aquis. But all in all, despite that, I do think both of them are going to be pretty much head to head when it comes to to wearability, should be able to find a case option that will work for you, unless you have maybe the smallest of wrists out there on the HydroConquest side, but still, I do believe pretty much a toss-up. So now moving on to our third category, we have Bracelet. So Bracelet here, I'm going to give the edge to the Oris Aquis for a few reasons. But I will mention right at the beginning though, if an integrated bracelet is not something that you want, then this is of course not going to be a point for the Aquis. But I would say just generally from a finishing perspective, the Aquis impresses more. The ability to have the alternating finishing techniques with the brushing and polishing on the Aquis just feels a tad more premium. The links are, I would say, better finished both on the underside and on top for just the aesthetic as well as the comfort. The integrated design is seamless to the case. It just melds together so well when looking at this on the wrist. And then also kind of the killing blow is going to be the clasp. That is one area on the Longine that I think is falling behind in the bracelet department. That is going to have stamped components. It does have some micro adjustment, but the Aquis wins there, more premium in its build and feel on the wrist when it comes to the bracelet. I will say when you flip it over to the straps, I think both of them are quite good, but ultimately Oris gets the win. For our next category, we have bezels. And remember, keep in mind that I am talking about the ceramic bezel insert version of the HydroConquest, but the one area that I'll give the slight edge to the Aquis is just the feel in terms of operation. The action of the bezel, a little bit more crisp, better response, tactile feedback is there, just a tad more premium than the HydroConquest, not by a far margin. If I had to say where it's the closest, I would say this is probably one of the closer categories when you're talking about picking a winner. It's close to maybe giving this one a tie, but I'll give a slight edge to the Aquis. Just feels a tad more premium when you're operating that bezel, a little bit less play as well. For case and dial finish, I'm going to also give the win to the Aquis. I do think just the mixing of brushing and polishing on the Aquis, as mentioned on that bracelet, both with a comfort standpoint as well as just an overall finishing standpoint from the aesthetic side of things, I think it's just going to win. The finishing on the HydroConquest is well done. I just think the devil's in the details when it comes to some of the polishing and some of the beveling that's going to happen on the case of the Aquis. When it comes to the dial, I also think the raised elements of the Aquis dial just has a bit more pop. One area where I'll say it's probably more of a tie is going to be in the lume department. I would give the slight edge in terms of the actual shine to the Aquis. The challenge is just the real estate of the Aquis isn't going to be as vast as that of other dive watches out there, which makes it sometimes underperform compared to things that are going to have just larger segments of superluminova on their dials. But here, generally, I think you have to give the Aquis as well an edge from the case and dial finish standpoint. Now for water resistance. This one, pretty easy for me. Tie. 300 meters of water resistance on the Aquis side, 300 meters of water resistance on the HydroConquest side. Screw down crown, crown guards, has pretty much all you're going to need for a capable dive watch in the 21st century. Now when it comes to movements, this is going to be a win for Longine. And remember, I'm talking about the base entry-level models for both of these brands, and this is where Longine, I think, really separates when it comes to movements being provided within their watches. Now, just to give some context here, the L888 caliber is Longine nomenclature for the ETA A31.L11, which is a modified version of the ETA 2892A2. So this is the slimmer, more premium upscale alternative to something like the ETA 2824. So this is also going to be modified. So some modifications here that are going to happen. You're going to have a change in the beat frequency. This is going to operate at 3.5 hertz instead of 4 hertz. So that's going to allow some maximization of the power reserve. This is going to extend out to 70 hours. These movements in other watches are also going to get upgrades and be able to be sent in for cost certification. These are not going to hit that when it comes to the package deal here for the HydroConquest, but still very good regulation that are coming out of the box of these when you're talking about just time testing. When we see HydroConquest going out the door, we've always noticed that they are usually running really well in terms of accuracy. And also when considering that power reserve, I think that's the big winner here for Longine. Now, when looking at the Oris, you have a base Sellita caliber, the SW200 on the inside, perfectly fine movement, perfectly acceptable movement, but pretty much off the shelf minus the change in the rotor. Movement is absolutely, again, perfectly fine, reliable, time-tested. I think Oris is one of the reasons and catalysts for the adoption of Sellita across the entire industry. They've been a champion for these movements for many years, and I think have allowed Sellita to establish an amazing reputation in the watch industry for just being robust, solid movements. But that said, in terms of delivering more from the movement category for less, you have to go with Longine here. To get something that's going to compete, you're going to have to move up to the caliber 400s, and for that price, you can get 2 HydroConquest, pick a dial of your choice twice, and you would then have it equal to the Oris Aquis caliber 400. So easy win here to Longine. Now for brand equity and heritage, you have to give Longine the edge here. Longine, probably one of the most storied Swiss manufacturers for watches, being a top 5 brand in total turnover in the Swiss watchmaking industry, which I don't think a lot of people consider. This is a $1 billion brand still to this day in 2022. They've been around since 1832. They've created many innovations when it comes to chronographs, as well as aviation timepieces, pocket watches, just one of the most storied brands of the last 150 years for some of the accomplishments that they have put forth. Oris, of course, is no slouch either, being in business for over 100 years, but in comparison, I think Longine is going to get the edge and just being more known. So if you are somebody that cares a little bit more about the brand and what you're buying into, I would give the edge to Longine. I will say one thing though, when it comes to Oris, their top model is the Aquis. When it comes to Longine, I would not say the HydroConquest is near the top in terms of one of their best-selling models, at least from those in the know. I do think that these do quite well when it comes to just looking for general value for that first watch, say over $1,000, and just can simply do it all. I think that's what the HydroConquest is probably known for. But when it comes to the enthusiast market, I think the Aquis tends to get more love, as well as some other Longine models like the Legend Diver, which typically is where many people are going to have the most affinity towards from the dive side of things. And then when it comes to price, winner here, no surprise, is going to also go to Longine. And even when you're factoring in pre-owned prices, this is still going to be the case. Longine typically you can find for cheaper than the Oris Aquis. That is going to change the market a little bit, but still $1,700 starting price, even lower if you're talking about the aluminum insert versions. And for the Oris Aquis, starting prices at retail around $2,000, and will go up from there if you're talking about more extreme models or more out there in terms of their dials, say like that New York Harbor edition, could go up much more. So ultimately, Longine gets the W here. Across the board, typically going to be at least $400 or $500 cheaper, regardless of what model you're going for. So now going through our 9 categories, we now can tally up the final scores. For the HydroConquest, got 5 points, and then for the Oris Aquis, we have 6 points. So the Oris Aquis obviously is the better watch for everybody, and you should go for that. No, not always that easy, but I hope this video is helpful when looking at this. If I had to pick between the two, I think I would probably go for the Oris Aquis, and that's factoring in just looking at these 2 watches, just because I think the Aquis has a tad more charm and identity than the HydroConquest, and I do think that you can get a lot of the same upside with the HydroConquest with the Conquest as well, which is going to have 300 meters of water resistance and basically just be the kind of everyday option to the HydroConquest. But it's a toss-up. I do think the Aquis also offers up a little bit more variety, so some of those more eclectic and daring designs that they have just draw a little bit more character and attention for myself. But this is a tough one to consider, and I know many people out there are trying to navigate this for themselves. Not an easy slam dunk pick, as you can see with the scores, but those are some of the things that I would keep in mind. Do you want something that has maybe a little bit more identity, or do you want kind of that stoic and just straightforward type of approach that comes with the HydroConquest and saving some money in the process? Ultimately, go for the one that you want the most. Don't let price be the number one indicator of it. Just buy responsibly. That's all I would recommend. So guys, if you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful, you like these comparison style videos, please give this video a thumbs up. Really would appreciate that as well. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. We're moving along here, 600,000 subscribers, which is a crazy number for the watch category. Really appreciate that as well. Definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com is an authorized dealer of both Longine and Oris. This is the common question that we get all the time, so I just wanted to address it in a video and just go through some of these considerations that I would maybe think about when looking to buy one of these watches. But if you are in the market for these watches, you like what you saw here today out of one of them, definitely recommend checking out the links down below to the collections of both of these watches. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.